You know when you breathe oxygen and it's like, then it's like, and you live?
Oh, my mama, I be breathing.
Breathe!
So in gas exchange, we take in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. Always remember that respiration and energy transformation of cellular respiration are two different things. They're not the same. So to understand gas exchange, we have to understand partial pressure. Partial pressure is the pressure exerted by a particular gas in a mixture of gases. It's a part to a whole type thing. You're trying to figure out the pressure exerted by one gas that's in the mixture. So if you look at the chart, you'll see that air contains a lot more oxygen than water at the same partial pressure. So gas exchange is really dependent on what the respiratory medium is, depending on if it's air or water. If it's air, then it's a lot easier for oxygen to move around the environment because the particles are so small. But if it's water, then it's a lot harder because there's not a lot of oxygen dissolved into the water. And then on top of that, if the water is very salty, then there's even less oxygen dissolved in the water. So all living cells that do gas exchange have a plasma membrane, meaning that oxygen and carbon dioxide must come in contact with them and take place by diffusion. So because it takes place by diffusion, the respiratory surfaces are usually large and thin. In order for animals to breathe underwater, they need gills. These animals need to ventilate in order to do gas exchange. In order to do gas exchange, they use concurrent exchange. Concurrent exchange is the exchange of a substance or heat between two fluids flowing in opposite directions. In fishes, these two fluids are blood and water. When the blood and water travel in opposite directions, the blood is way less saturated with oxygen than the water, so oxygen is diffused from the water to the blood. The tracheal system is a network of air tubes that branch throughout the body. The largest tubes are called the tracheae. Body movement of the insects expand and collapse the air tubes. Unlike the tracheal system in insects, lungs are localized. The circulatory system helps get the oxygens from the lungs to the whole body. Most reptiles rely on their lungs for gas exchange. Turtles are the exceptions because they can breathe in water and out of water.
It is incredibly important that all living species have an efficient respiration system suitable for their environment, behavior, and structure. Remember, form follows function. Now we will go on to explain the different strategies and structures species use to breathe. Amphibians undergo positive pressure breathing to ventilate their lungs. In this process, the lungs are inflated with forced airflow and exhaled by the elastic recoil of lungs. The avian respiratory system requires 2 cycles of inhalation and exhalation to pass one breath. The first inhalation and exhalation respectively fill and contract the posterior of air sacs for air into the lungs, while the second inhalation and exhalation does the same, but to the anterior air sacs. Mammals use negative pressure breathing by pulling air into their lungs by muscle contraction of the diaphragm to expand the thoracic cavity and lower air pressure within the lungs compared to the air pressure outside of the body. Remember that gas travels from a region of higher pressure to a region of lower pressure. Thus, during contraction, air rushes into the lungs that have a lower air pressure, while during relaxation, air is forced out of the body due to an increase in air pressure within the lungs. The mammalian respiratory system begins from the nasal cavity, where air is inhaled through and filtered by hairs as it moves into the pharynx, the intersection between food and air. Then it passes through the larynx. The larynx ensures the epiglottis covers the glottis, so food travels down the esophagus to the stomach instead of the trachea. Once air enters the trachea, or windpipe, it moves into 2 bronchi, each leading to their respective lung. Within the lung, the bronchi branch repeatedly into finer and finer tubes called bronchioles. These bronchioles end in microscopic alveoli that are lined by thin, moist epithelium cells. For mammals, gas exchange occurs in the alveoli, air sacs that increase surface area and reduce surface tension by creating surfactant. The diffusion of carbon dioxide occurs in the opposite direction. Branches of the pulmonary arteries, shown in blue, transport oxygen-poor blood to the alveoli, where they will be reoxidized, while branches of the pulmonary veins, shown in red, transport oxygen-rich blood from the alveoli back to the heart.
In carbon dioxide transport, only about 7% of the carbon dioxide released by respiring cells is transported in a solution in blood plasma. The rest diffuses from plasma into erythrocytes and reacts with water, and this forms carbonic acid. Most hydrogen ions bind to hemoglobin and other proteins. The change in blood's pH is usually minimal. Most carbonic acid diffuses out of the erythrocytes and is transported into the lungs in plasma. The remaining 5% of carbon dioxide binds to hemoglobin and is then transported in erythrocytes. Carbon dioxide diffuses into the alveolus. The amount of carbon dioxide in the blood decreases. This decrease shifts the chemical balance to better conserve carbonic acid and carbon dioxide, which in turn enables further diffusion of carbon dioxide into the alveolus. There is a lot of variety when it comes to animals having to adapt when they do not have access to their normal respiratory medium. One example is when an air-breathing mammal swims underwater. Many are able to achieve this because of their capacity to store large amounts of oxygen in their bodies. This is attributed to high concentration of an oxygen-storing protein called myoglobin, which is stored in their muscles. In addition to high storage of myoglobin, mammals have different adaptations and methods that help them conserve oxygen, one of which is swimming with little muscular effort, gliding passively for long periods of time. During a dive, their heart and oxygen consumption rate decrease. This will cause the blood to be routed to other parts of the body, such as the brain, spinal cord, eyes, adrenal glands, and in some pregnant mammals, the placenta. Mammals, including humans, have a diving reflex that can be triggered by a plunge into water. When the face comes in contact with cold water, the heart rate immediately decreases and blood flow to other extremities is reduced. Natural selection and genetic variation give more or less advantages to different types of mammals.
Most of our breathing is involuntary, and the neurons responsible are in the medulla oblongata, which is near the base of the brain. When you breathe deeply, a negative feedback mechanism stops the lungs from overexpanding. When you exercise, your metabolism increases, and that raises the concentration of CO2 in the blood and cerebrospinal fluid. A higher CO2 leads to an increase in H+, which lowers pH. This increases the rate of breathing and remains high until the excess CO2 is gone. The pH returns to normal. When O2 levels drop very low, your breathing increases. During inhalation, fresh air mixes with air remaining in the lungs, and this results in the alveoli to have higher PO2 and the blood flowing through the alveolar capillaries. In the systemic capillaries, gradients of partial pressure favor the net diffusion of O2 out of the blood and CO2 into the blood. When O2 leaves and CO2 goes into the blood, it is returned to the heart and pumps to the lungs again. Animals transport most of their O2 to proteins called respiratory pigments. The respiratory pigments circulate with the blood or hemolymph. The pigments increase the amount of O2 that can be carried.
Before we start to turn it out, you must learn to crump out. Before we start to turn it out, you must first begin to breathe in.